My name is Lucy Delap. I teach history at the University of Cambridge and I'm a fellow of Murray Edwards College. Welcome to my exp. When activists look back to feminists of the past, they sometimes see a movement that to their eyes was too timid or was too class-dominated by wealthy or educated women, or was too racist, or was too oriented around the concerns of the global north to really have much significance to their struggles today. So there has been a kind of repudiation of feminism of the past. And I want to suggest that there are some really important ways that we should be looking back to the past. One way is to see shared tactics over time. And in my research, I've been fascinated by the returning to particular kinds of ways of fighting male violence, of resisting sexism and patriarchy, which are thrown up again and again in different kinds of places. And one such is the tactic of stripping, of nakedness, of going topless or going completely naked. And we see that in very, very different circumstances being used by activists. So we can see it, for example, in the anti-colonial activism of women in Nigeria against British occupation, where they stripped to confront troops or to confront the representatives of the Nigerian state, to insult those men and to make their point that as women they had no respect for that kind of imperial state. We can see nakedness in women's liberation marches in Australia, for example, women stripping in front of police to again show their lack of respect, their freedom, and finding enormous sense of release in dumping kind of conventional dress codes. For example, today the debate about the access of trans women to women-only spaces is an enormously divisive issue for feminists. And we shouldn't see that as a kind of death spiral, a kind of paralysis of our movement today, because it's no different in some ways from the enormous debates that there have been over feminist tactics and over who feminism is for and what feminism means in the past. So that gives us a way of seeing those debates as not paralyzing but productive, as a way of moving on, as a way of elucidating our feminist priorities. And I mean, as an aside, I would also say looking back into feminist history reminds us that issues around non-binary individuals, around trans individuals, are not particularly new. There's always been forms of subversion of the gender binary and individuals who don't identify clearly with the gender or the sex that they're assigned at birth. When we look back to feminist foremothers, such as the really significant Uruguayan activist Paulina Luisi, who was an absolute powerhouse of feminist organizing in the Pan-American or Hispano-American feminist movement in the early to mid-20th century. She seems a really inspiring figure. She encouraged women all across Latin America and Central America to broaden their feminism, to include questions of social justice, of land tenure, of state violence. She gives us a lot that we can use today. However, she was also a promoter at times of ideas that we would think of as eugenic ideas or racist ideas. So she's one of those feminists with a kind of mixed legacy. I don't, however, think that just because she didn't see the world as we might see it, and she had some views that we can be critical of, that we should kind of cancel her, that we should wipe her out of the feminist canon. What does the future hold? Historians aren't always very good at answering that question. But it seems like a pretty exciting moment now where feminisms are pointing in a lot of different directions, and there's a lot of momentum behind them. I do think that the incorporation of men, as well as non-binary individuals, into what previously might have been called a women's movement is super exciting and gives us enormous potential to develop in new ways. I think that the extraordinary resources that social media bring has allowed feminisms to flourish, to have exchanges across different kinds of borders and boundaries that previously might have divided us.